You heard Hank Paulson say he's concerned over the long term. It could really do damage to U.S. trade, but also U.S. business. You're a long-term investor. How do you look at trade?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Hank, but I do think this is a short-term problem. Warren Buffett always talks about the fact that our capitalist democracy is the best system ever invented. And the last century, the Dow went from 66 to over 11,000 with, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, several recessions. So we'll get through this problem, too. It's not going to last forever. Our democracy, our capitalist democracy, is the best system ever invented.
So you're a bottom-up, somewhat contrarian investor. You really take a look at the fundamentals of a company, and you take a long-term view, the way Warren Buffett does. But isn't this different from the last century? We have a China now that is about to overtake, if it hasn't already overtaken us, as the largest economy in the world. The United States has been bestride the world for some time now. We're looking at a second-class position. What might that do to growth opportunities here as you look at investment in the United States?
Well, I think this is just going to be a temporary problem. I have so much faith and confidence in the United States, and we'll get through this one way or another. We'll ultimately have a new administration someday. Some of us think it'll happen sooner rather than later. And we'll get back to normal, and people will regain the confidence they've had in the United States over this long, long period.
Well, let me ask whether the bond markets will maintain their faith in the United States. And I say this because we're looking at Italy right now with their 2.4% of GDP deficit. One of the issues we talked with Hank last night about, actually, was the U.S. fiscal deficit. In the long run, couldn't that do real damage to the United States, to its economy, and ultimately to investments such as you're making?
I don't think so. We've had deficits before in the history of the United States, and we've gotten through this. We've had times during war when you had to gear up and get resources to keep our army strong and our military strong. So this is something, again, it'll be temporary. It will be a problem that we'll be able to resolve and we'll be able to solve, and we'll forget this crisis that we're living through today.
Okay, so this is sounding pretty good so far. Trade, not that big a problem, it's a short-term problem. Deficits we've had before, things like that. Let's talk about a little bit about politics, not as politics as such, but we've seen this dramatic play out of the Kavanaugh hearings. And I talked to Hank, actually, about the need to have political will when there's a real crisis, a fiscal crisis. We had it last time. We got Congress with George W. Bush, the president, to really back him. Given what's going on in Washington right now, do you have confidence? And let's listen to what actually Hank had to say about this and his concerns.
The financial crisis brought out, in some ways, the worst in America in terms of greed and the problems in some of our regulatory systems and so on. But at the end, people came together, and I would really like to believe if we, God forbid, had another crisis like this, that the country could come together. But you're right, the things we did were so unpopular that I think it's going to make it even more difficult for our successors.
So Hank would like to believe people will come together. What we're seeing in Washington right now would not tend to suggest that would be possible. When you make investment decisions, do you have to adjust for what we're seeing as hyper-partisanship? I think it's fair to say in Washington today.
We do look at it and think about this crisis and the short-term turmoil that it can cause. But often, when you have real turmoil in the United States, when we had the Civil War, which is the worst thing that could have ever happened, it brought us a great leader, Abraham Lincoln. I think we will have another great political leader that will come out of this crisis and help to bring people together in a way that will be very constructive and positive for our country.